welcome back to another edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt, and with me, as always, senior draft. What did you call yourself? Simulator expert now.
I'm the Mr. Simulator guy.
Mr. Eric Kennedy. And Eric, we have a guest, and I'm not going to waste time with us. Introduction. Everybody knows us. And everybody knows our guest, John Schmeelk of the Giants podcast, the pregame, postgame, the draft stuff you've got going on. John, you have been busy, by the way. You have been a very busy man. So thank you for joining us. How's your day been? Because it's not like this is the only thing you've been doing today.
I'm exhausted. It has been a long process. It's a lot of watching players. Now we're finally less than a week away, guys. I'm excited. The draft starts. Let's see, we're recording this around 9 o'clock. So the draft starts 6 days, 23 hours from now, which is awesome. And finally, all the work that we've put into this, we'll see what the results are, which will be fun.
Yeah, so, I think. Oh, sorry, John.
No, it's fine. We're going to touch on a lot of players, and I know Eric's got some specific things right away.
Oh, yeah.
What I wanted to ask you real quick though, because you've talked to people, you've talked to players, you've talked to scouts, and of course you talk to people within the organization. What is some of the people outside of the Giants organization, scouts that you talk to, people who kind of, track the draft, what are their overall thoughts? Is it a consistent thought with a lot of those on what they think the Giants are going to do? Or is it all over the board like a lot of fans are all over the board?
I think they've settled, it seems, on whomever the Browns don't, assuming Cam Ward goes number one.
Right.
They've seemed to have settled on whoever the Browns do not take it to. Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter will be the Giants' pick at 3. That seems to be what the outside noise is. A week ago, I think people from the outside were probably leaning more Shedeur Sanders. I'm not sure what changed in that thinking, but that's the kind of change I've seen over the last week. But I think, based on what I understand, everyone's going off what people in the league think the Giants are going to do. My understanding is that the building's been pretty sealed up and no one has sources in the building, and everyone's kind of just going on what other people around the league think the Giants are going to do. So that's kind of the feel I've gotten for things. They obviously don't tell me what they're going to do, so
Right.
I have no idea. But I think that's kind of where we're at right now.
And if they did tell you and you told us, you'd be out of work tomorrow.
Yes, that is also correct. That is also correct.
Yeah. I just want to sort of step back for a quick sec before we get into the details, but I want to first commend you for the last few years for your draft interviews, your draft preparation. You have wonderful guests on, and I think if you didn't work for the Giants, I think your first love, you'd be doing a Knicks podcast, but I think your second love would be doing this draft stuff because you are able to ask the right questions and you let your guests talk. And I've been really trying to get people to watch your stuff because it's been top notch. I've been watching a lot of your interviews, and I want to set this up because I've heard a lot of your stuff, but I want our audience to hear it. You do go back and you do look at these players, and I think you said you've got 8 first-round grades on about 18 players. Roughly, is that where you?
Yeah, I think I'm still working on Jihad Campbell. I haven't played because I do linebackers last because I find them to be the hardest players to grade, so I saved them for like the last thing. I probably right now will finish with either 15 or 16, depending on how it goes.
And I think I've heard you say multiple times, between picks 20 and 50, not much difference in the grand scheme of things. And so it's going to be a pretty wild pecking order. People are going to go higher than some think, lower than some think. And that happens every year. But this year it could be particularly crazy. It sounds
it'll be worse. It'll be worse. I think you're going to have eyebrows raised at pick 21 or even 18, to be honest with you. You get past pick 15, I think all bets are off. In terms of who might go in that next group. And then I think from like picks 50 to 110, 120, I think that's another huge group where there's not going to be that much difference or there'll be a lot of difference between the boards and the league because there are so many guys I think that could be considered in that mix because this is such a large draft class. It's the last year of the extra year of COVID eligibility.
Right.
So a lot of things have contributed to this. It's a gigantic draft class. So while I agree with the consensus that you don't have nearly as many blue chip players as we've had in like last year's draft, for example. This is, if you're picking from, 30 to 120, you can find a lot of starters. I think that's kind of where the meat of this draft is, and where you can, do a lot of damage. Maybe not finding a star, maybe not finding a Pro Bowler, but you could find good NFL starters.
And before I kick it back to John, the other point that I've heard you say over and over again, and I think a lot of people are in agreement with you, really deep on defensive line, really deep at edge, really deep at running back,
Yep.
tight end, a lot of interesting tight ends. And I've heard you say this multiple times. While the top tier wide receivers aren't there in numbers, this is an interesting wide receiver class in the second, third, fourth rounds with a lot of different flavors depending on what you're looking for. If I'm leaving anything out or have I got
No,
anything
I
wrong?
think you hit it. I mean, I'm
Okay.
not sure if there's I feel good about Ted McMillan, but maybe he's probably the only guy I think
Right.
has a chance to be a true number one wide receiver in this draft class. I think everyone else would be either really good number two or number three, depending on who you're talking about in those first couple of rounds. But if you're looking for, if you're the Dallas Cowboys and you have CeeDee Lamb, you're looking for a number two wide receiver. You're going to find one in rounds
Right.
2 or 3 of this draft. If you're, the Chargers looking for someone to complement Lad McConkey, right? Who I'm not sure is a true number one, but you're looking for a guy that can help him a little bit. You'll find somebody in this draft class, and you hit it. It's deep at edge, it's deep at defensive tackle, it's deep at running back. I think you can also find guards into late day too, because so many of these tackles that are coming out, I think this year, are converting into guard for various reasons, whether it's athleticism or arm length. Take your pick, depending on the guy. You'll be able to find guys at those spots. Offensive tackle dries up very quickly.
Right.
There's maybe 7 guys or 8 guys in the whole draft that I feel good about staying out there. Now, I'm sure there's guys much later that I haven't gotten to that can, maybe develop into that type of player. But you're looking at 5 guys early. The Boston College kid, Trapolo, Charles Grant, maybe Jalen Travis, Ursary. So you're looking at maybe 9, 10 guys in the whole draft you would think can be a starting tackle one day. That's not a lot. Last year, I think you had more than 10 offensive tackles just in the first round of the draft. It was such a great offensive tackle draft. So that's a little bit different. Quarterback, you don't have the 3 guys that are going the top 10 like you had last year. So that's obviously a little bit different. Tight ends better, to your point. Corner, not great at the top, in my opinion, but I do think you'll find starters, back end of round 1, round 2. I think you'll find another, handful of guys in there too. So I think it's not going to have superstars, but I think there are a lot of very good, solid football players in the draft that if you pick the right guys, you can find guys that are going to help your team win football games.
Now, I like how I'm sure it wasn't just off the top of your head. You said eyebrows might get raised, and you went instantly to 21. 21 is Pittsburgh.
No, I didn't actually. That was honestly coincidence.
I was like, well, maybe because clearly. So real quick, because I know we're talking about the draft, but we saw more of the Aaron Rodgers drama. And we know, and he even dropped, as he loves to do, he dropped a little shade at the Jets, threw a little sunshine in Brian Daboll's direction that he had, what do you say? He had a beautiful football mind, that they had a good conversation. My favorite part was that he would be willing to play even for just 10 million, which was nice the way he shared that. But with what is your thoughts on that whole situation with the Giants, with the Steelers, with Aaron Rodgers, borderline holding teams hostage in a way of like, what are we doing? The Giants obviously at one point just said, we can't play this game. We got to go in a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you just can't wait, right? I mean, the Giants want to go into this draft understanding what they need. And I don't know where the progress was on the Aaron Rodgers thing or anything like that, but I think you want to know what you need, right? So if you're still sitting there not knowing Aaron Rodgers is going to play or retire, which, according to all the reports out there, that's still an option for him. I think Aaron might even said that. I did not watch that interview. I'm not putting an hour of my day into that. But, I think the basic conjecture is it's the Steelers, or it's still possible retiring. So you need to know what you have to do at the quarterback position here. So I think, I don't know which guy was their first choice, but I think it makes more sense to have the bird in the hand than the one that you're still looking for at this point in the offseason. So at the most important position on the football field, you know exactly what you need to do in the draft based on what you have in-house at the quarterback spot.
Yeah, week out too.
Yeah.
So again, one big picture here, and I think I know you know this, and I'm not sure a lot of Giants fans still understand the approach Joe Shane had going into free agency. He has said it, but that he wanted to get the team to the point where when they got to the draft, they didn't feel like they had to force the pick. So as he said multiple times, I want to construct the roster coming out of free agency almost as if I'm going to be playing a game today. And I think
Yeah.
they've kind of done that they can go into this draft and not force a pick. And I've heard you mention that specifically at quarterback. And there's both sides of the ball I'd like to address at different parts of this interview, but I'll start with offense. Defense is my favorite side of the ball, so I want to start off with offense.
Sure.
But one of the things I've been struggling with, maybe that's not the right word, but, and I know you talked about this with Dave Del Cole and your Scouts Honor podcast, but I've had the same thought is, does one address going into the strength of the draft? So look at defensive linemen, look at the edge, look at the tight ends, running backs early, or do you start going first towards those areas that are going to fall off more rapidly? So looking at the average Giants fan coming into this is going to be saying the Giants are coming back with 10 of 11 starters. The only chart change that they have made heading into the draft is at quarterback that scored 16 points a game. We've got to do something on offense. I see this all over social media. What are we doing? We need more firepower here. Which at pick 34, that's where I'm more interested right now. It's 34 and 65. Everyone, including myself, has been making the argument offensive lineman or defensive lineman at that spot. But part of me says maybe a wide receiver, if somebody falls like an Ibuka at Ohio State, he's there. Does the team then consider maybe trading, focusing on defensive line and offensive line later in the draft? Is there any wide receiver that you would consider at 34 that you think if he's there, I've got to think about it long and hard?
It's a good question. Look at my board here. I would say, I mean, I would have a tough time picking a wide receiver there.
Okay.
If, one of these defensive tackles are there or one of these guards are there, I would have a hard time doing it because I do think you can still get a good wide receiver in the top around 3.
Right.
And to Joe Shane's point, they don't have a huge need this year at wide receiver. I think you might next year because Wandale Robinson at the end of the rookie contract. Who knows why that's going to go? We just don't know. So I think you can pick a wide receiver, but I think at 34, where you might have an opportunity to pick a quarterback, you can pick a guy that I think can start right away, a guard or defensive tackle.
Right.
I have a hard time convincing myself to pick a guy that would walk in as the 3rd or 4th wide receiver instead of picking a guy in the trenches where, look how these good teams are built. They're built up front. And I think this is an upfront trenches draft. And by the way, I think if you pick a defensive tackle at 34, you can pick another one later in the draft too. I have no problem with doubling up at that position in this particular draft. And I think you can find running back is so deep. And I think, again, wide receiver is really deep on day 2. Tight end's pretty good into early round 4. I think you can find guys at those other positions a little bit later before you get diminishing returns at the defensive tackle guard spot. So I would be surprised if they went wide receiver at 34. I could very well be wrong about this, but I would be surprised. I think that is a quarterback or trenches pick at that 34 spot.
And the reason why I'm throwing this out there is I'm on board with you 100%. I'm just trying to, is there a position that we're not thinking about that might surprise us there? Like, for instance, they had Hampton.
Let me add one. No. Let me just add one thing in. This will add to some depth possibilities of a position. Ryan Ramczyk, the Saints All-Pro right tackle, is retiring.
Not
so the Saints now have another hole that that another offensive line a team's going to need just there. So we're talking about offensive line. I wanted to throw that in. It just was announced that he's retiring.
And again, I by the way, guys, I think there could be good value at wide receiver there if the Giants decide to do that. I totally get where they're coming from. We've seen all the reports out there that they've brought a lot of these top running backs in. I heard one of you guys mention Omari and Hampton. It would not surprise me if you saw a day 2 running back simply based on those reports of the guys that have made those 30 visits. And then I think tight end's a possibility at some point too. So I would not put anything past them. I don't disagree that this offense could use some more firepower. I don't think the fans are off base on that. I think Brian Daboll is always looking for more explosive players that can score points. So would it shock me? No, but I think the way this board is going to fall, I don't think any of the McMillan, Golden, Egbuka, probably not burden either group, will get to you at 34.
Right.
So I think at that point, you're probably not looking at that position group.
And that's the group that I think that's the only way you consider it. Like if an Ibuka fell, maybe that may be there. But so I'm with you again, 100% on offensive line, defensive line there. And when the offensive line, I know you ran a mock, I think, on your show, and yours, you had the tackle. Connerly fell at that point, which I think he's probably going to go higher than that. But
I agree.
Same names keep coming up. You know, Zabel probably won't be there, but it's Donovan Jackson. It's Simmons might, based on medicals. Booker might, but I'm not sure how much he fits into the Giants system. I think a popular pick for a lot of Giants fans is Donovan Jackson at that spot. They look at the defensive tackles, they look at Donovan Jackson, maybe Zabel if he's there too. So I think that's kind of what your thinking was in terms of the offensive lineman when I've heard you on other podcasts.
Yeah, I think that's the group. I don't think Connolly gets out of the first round. If Josh Simmons gets out of the first round, you throw down your phone and you rush that card to the podium, in my opinion. I think if he stays healthy the whole year and continued playing the way he did at the start of the year. And by the way, there's no guarantee of that, which is why there's risk here.
Right.
You know, he played only 5 games this year, and the first 3 were against non-Power 5 schools and some FCS schools in there. So he only had 2 real games. It was Iowa and
Oregon.
No, Oregon was the game he got hurt in. He played like 16 snaps.
Right. I thought that's what you were talking about. Okay,
UCL, I forget who their first Big 10 game was this year, but whoever their first Big 10 game was, then Iowa, and then he got hurt versus Oregon. So he played 5 full games, then he played like 15 snaps versus Oregon, or 19 snaps. I don't think he's going to get there. I don't think any of those offensive tackles are going to get there. I think where I've struggled, and I still don't have a firm answer, though I think I would lean Donovan Jackson, just because I feel like I can get a defensive tackle later, is if you're looking at Donovan Jackson versus Tyreek Williams, and that's your decision, because I do think you can find some run stuffers a little bit later in the draft, whether it's Alfred Collins or a Jamari Caldwell, somebody like that. But I think I would lean Jackson for that reason, but I think the Jackson-Tyreek Williams debate is an interesting one. And frankly, I don't think you could go wrong with either player. They'll be able to come in right away and give you really good snaps in the, on the line.
And cue John with your Jaylen Milroe question here.
Well, I mean, first off, I mean, the fact that the NFL invited Jaylen Milroe says that there is at least a thought there that he may go in round 1. So they generally don't want to bring somebody there that they know isn't going to go. You don't want to embarrass somebody. So the thought is he could go. But if he's sitting there at 34, let's say the Giants go, it doesn't matter. Hunter Carter, I prefer Carter for going for Carter, because I grew up with, we got LT, and it didn't matter that we had LT. We got Carl Banks later on, and you built around, you can't have enough pass rushers. It happened again in the early 2000s. So you get Carter, you come back. But if Jaylen Milroe's sitting there, I feel like a lot of people are really underestimating what he can do, because there's a lot of potential for the quarterback piece of it. But I think his floor is super high, because at the very least, you can use him in so many different ways. Even if he doesn't ultimately develop to be the guy to take over at quarterback, he is a far more athletic Taysom Hill, by far.
Yeah, I've gone on a journey with Jaylen Milroe, to be honest with you. If you talked to me in December, I was, or maybe late October, I was all about, day 2, developmental player. He had that really good game against Georgia. I think that was in early October, mid-October, where he played a really good first half. And I was all on board with that. Then he really slowed down. And I'm like, all right, I need to go back and look at him and watch him. So before I had a chance to really dive into his tape, as I was watching a lot of the position players before I got to Mobile for the Senior Bowl, I got down there, and look, it was not great. He was all over the place with his accuracy. He never unleashed a deep ball down the field where he really showed off his arm. And I walked out of there like, this guy does not look like an NFL player throwing the football, right? But you have to remind yourself that this is a week in an all-star game against guys and with receivers that he hasn't thrown the ball to before. So you're going to have some timing issues, and you're going to have some situations like you have there. So leaving, the Senior Bowl, that's in my head. It's the first thing I think about, and I kind of push him aside. But now, as I've thought about this and I've gone back and I look at the tools and I see the athleticism, I described Jayden Daniels last year coming out as having a high floor because of the legs, right? And, even if
Right.
the passing game doesn't come along quickly, he can come along. Now, I think Milroe is way behind where Jayden Daniels was, so I think it does lower the floor a little bit
Sure.
if you're really raw as a passer. And I talked to Chris Sims today. That's going up tomorrow on the Giants Huddle podcast. So I'll trust the old quarterback about this, the former quarterback. He said he thinks that's almost a 2-year process with Jaylen Milroe, right? Not a 1-year process. So, was that Chris Sims or was that? I think that was Chris Sims that said 2 years. I've had so many of these interviews, I can't keep them straight.
Yeah,
But
right.
that might have been Thomas Dimitroff, which is going up next week. It was either Sims or Dimitroff, one of the two. They said it's a 2-year process. I think it was Dimitroff, actually. It's a 2-year process with Milroe, so you had to be patient with him. But, and this is why I've kind of warmed to it a little bit, and I would understand why the Giants don't want to do this. But the reason I think you can make the argument to do it is that even if he's not ready to be, and look, you have Russell Wilson here, the quarterback this year. I'm not sure any quarterback you draft, not named Cam Ward, would be able to beat Russell Wilson
Right.
at quarterback
Sure.
early in the year anyway, to be totally honest with you. So the Giants would have to make that decision depending on who they drafted when. But I think for a guy like Milroe, he can sit all year, but Brian Daboll is creative enough for a guy that runs a 4.4, and you mentioned Taysom Hill. He's not quite that heavy, but he is 220 pounds. He
Right.
basically moves and looks like a running back, right? That Brian Daboll can utilize him a way to help the offense this year. So you get a developmental quarterback, but to your question earlier, you also get a player that can add some juice to your offense and help you score points.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't want to use the 34th pick on someone that's giving me nothing this year. And I mean, like, not if everything goes well, he doesn't see the field. I don't want to use a 34th pick on a guy like that. But if you can use Milroe in that way, while developing him as a quarterback and a passer, work on his fundamentals, work on his mechanics, things like that, wrap his head around the NFL offense. He's a really smart guy. He's super charismatic. He's going to be a great guy in the locker room. I would be okay with that. Now, I think when you get to 34, and this is the fun and tricky part of it, right? If you get to 34 and Shook is there and Milroe is there, and maybe even Dart is there, because if Shedeur Sanders drops right out of the top 10, and who knows, we'll see if that happens or not. And let's say Pittsburgh takes him, there's a chance no other quarterbacks get taken in the first round here, right? So you could be looking at those 3 guys available at 34. If you feel good about those 3 quarterbacks, would you then be willing to trade down, pick up some extra, draft stock later, maybe in or late round 3, early round 4, pick up a pick at 40, you get one of the quarterbacks there, and then you get the extra pick on top of it. You're playing with fire there.
Right.
Odds are the team's
Right.
not going to like those 3 quarterbacks equally, so I don't think in reality that would happen. But I think depending on who's on the board at 34, that's a move you can consider if there are multiple quarterbacks there and you don't move down past a team like the Saints. But that might, the Browns might trade up. The Saints could trade up. Who knows? You might have just one quarterback left at 34. And if that's the position they want to go, they'll have to do it there. It all depends on how the board falls.
I think they're going to get offers. Well, we know Joe Shane said it. They're going to get offers for 3. And I'd be shocked if they're not going to get offers for 34. And again, I heard you in an earlier interview, same thing that I was thinking. You could trade down maybe 4 or 5 spots at 34, maybe pick up a 4th rounder, and because you have that extra pick, you can do different things. Again, the sweet spot in this draft is kind of like 3rd, 4th round in a lot of ways. And I've heard you talk about a bunch of times. You light up when you have an interview, when you're doing an interview and somebody mentions Shook. It sounds like you, of all the quarterbacks, I don't want to put you on a spot here, but it sounds like all the quarterbacks you've looked at, it sounds like you're more intrigued by Shook throwing as a thrower than anyone else not named Cam Ward in this class. It sounds, is that a fair assessment?
If you just watch him this year and you forget about the injuries, you forget about the first, 6 years of his college career? This was year 7, right? He was backing up Justin Herbert back in the day.
Right.
And you just watch the tape and you blue pill yourself to all that other information. It's really good. I mean, he throws the ball well. He's mobile. He's got a good arm. He's different arm angles. He plays the position loose. He's pretty accurate. He plays in an NFL-style offense. There are a lot of things to like, but you can't wish those other factors away.
Right.
So I am not – I've let that creep back into my mind a little bit. And I forget who I was joking today with somebody. it's like Jason Bourne, right? They like wiped his memory, and that's what
Right.
I kind of wiped away the fact that Shook was older and he had the injury history. But then in the movie, like the memories start coming back, and like in the last week, it keeps getting in the back of my head, like, but he's going to be 26 in September. He had all these injury problems.
Right.
And look, there is some stuff on tape that, you worry about. When he faces pressure, he has the tendency to panic sometimes and run away. And he is the most throwaways, I think, of almost any quarterback in college football this year, which, by the way, is not necessarily a bad thing. He will throw the ball in the traffic sometimes. None of these quarterbacks are perfect, right? You can come up with good and bad for every quarterback we're going to talk about today. But look, there's a lot of intriguing things. People that I trust that cover the league nationally have said there is a real shot he does not get to the Giants at 34. That there are teams like Diana Rossini had a report the other day that she was talking to an offensive coordinator that they thought Shook had a better year than Cam Ward had. So I think there are fans of Shook around the league, especially on the coaching side, because they don't worry about the age, right? They want the guy they can get and put in right away. They don't want to have to wait and develop somebody. They want someone that can play right away. And I think Shook is probably the most NFL ready. Does he have more long-term promise than a Shedeur Sanders? Maybe not. I think that's a real debate to have. But, I think he does, from what I hear and what people have told me on air on our reports, there is a lot of love for him in the league. And depending on who you talk to, there's a lot of love for Jackson Dart as well. And there's a lot of love for, obviously, Shedeur, who's probably going to go a lot higher, and understandably so. And for a guy like Milroe, where, I think all those guys, once you get to the Rams that pick 26, is that what the Rams are picking, right?
Yeah.
I think so. Right.
All those guys are in play at any point after 26 for a team trading up, for the Rams taking them. I think that's when that next group of quarterbacks starts to go. I don't think the Rams necessarily do it, but I don't think it's impossible per se. But I think that's when you start keeping an eye on the Browns moving up, the Saints moving up. If the Steelers don't pick one of 21, they don't have a second-round pick. Do they trade a pick from next year's draft to move back in to pick someone? I don't know. So I think that's, do the Raiders and Jets want to get a future franchise quarterback to develop behind their guys? I don't know the answer to that behind Geno and Justin Fields. So I think that's going to be fascinating, right? After Cam Ward ostensibly goes one, where are the next group of quarterbacks going to go, and in what order? Which I think is going to be a lot of fun to see that play out.
With the quarterbacks in mind, what do you personally? So I know you don't have the inside information, or even if you did, you can't tell us you have the inside information. What do you make of the Giants? Clearly, you don't want to say the last second, but we are getting towards the witching hour here. They're out in Colorado to go see Shedeur again. They're going to be looking again, I believe, at both Milroe and Shook. They're looked at again. What are you thinking there in terms of why the Giants are doing that again so late in the process, when it seemed like they're fairly locked in with Hunter Carter? Again, we don't know, but thoughts on that trip out to Boulder today?
Yeah, look, I think they just want to get the full picture on these quarterbacks. And I've done interviews with Brian and Joe, and they've both told me on the air multiple times how important these private workouts for quarterbacks are, and getting them one-on-one for a day in front of a board, in front of video, where you learn things about how they process, how they see plays, their decision-making, the sort of stuff it's hard to just see from watching tape. That's what you get from spending a full day with them. And, these pro days, it's scripted. It's what they do well. All right, well, this is what our offense is. Can you do what we want you to do in our offense? And I think, and can you learn what you want our offense to be? And how quickly do you pick it up? Do you fight against certain things? Are you fully on board with it? Do you think, does it look right when the quarterback's trying to execute your offense? So I think they're doing it with all three guys based on reports. They had already done Jackson Dart, at an earlier time. And look, I think what people forget, guys, is with the draft being the 24th, there is literally 1 week less between the draft and the combine this year. You throw in free agency, and remember, the Giants added a couple guys late in the two quarterbacks, and then pro days. These guys don't want to do their private workouts before their pro days. It's just for Shedeur. Joe Shane brought this up at the presser, right? His pro day wasn't until April. And then the Giants come back. They need to meet with their scouts. They need to finish their 30 visits. And the 30 visits ended on Wednesday this week, right? So you can't leave then. You go to Colorado, that's 2 days, right? You lose 2 days of meetings with your scouts. You lose 2 days of 30 visits. When you're already kind of jam-packed and everything is really pressured in there all at the same time. So I think, honestly, I think it was a scheduling thing. And that's what Joe Shane said. This was the only time they could get time with these guys done. Remember, Giants are not the only teams trying to get workouts and days with these guys and visits. I mean, I got to imagine guys like Milroe, Shuck, probably had 30 visits with half the league, I would bet, given how much you're trying to learn about these guys. And that's a 2 weeks worth of schedule, at least for these guys. So you run out of time quick. My guess is that this is just the best time for the Giants and for the players to meet and get it done. I would not take anything out of the fact that this is happening later in the process rather than 2 weeks ago. I think it's just part of the evaluation process that the Giants front office and coaching staff likes to do.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, with Sanders specifically, I just want to ask you this. If you had one big concern of Sanders, like just of all of the things that he does, the way he plays, anything else around him, what's your one big concern? The thing that you say, that kind of concerns me, how it transitions to the NFL.
Yeah, and by the way, I think I've mentioned with all the quarterbacks, I think, we talked about what Shook has issues with when he feels pressure, right? Milroe on the accuracy and the intermediate to short range and consistency throwing the ball. Talk about Jackson Dart coming from an offense that was really simple from a college perspective. Even Cam Ward with the turnovers, right? He plays a little bit too loose sometimes. Yeah. He makes some mistakes. Right. For Shedeur, look, I think he's a smart quarterback. I think he's really tough. I think when his feet are planted in the pocket and he steps into his throws, he's accurate. He throws a nice loopy deep ball when he's on platform, and I think he does that really well. I think when you watch him, and I think all of us can attest to this, by the way, that there's probably a good reason for it because the offensive line at Colorado has been so poor, is that how he handles pressure, right? Mm-hmm. You don't see him step up in the pocket quite as much. You see a lot of pivoting, spinning out, going backwards. And I think if you're a guy like Jordan Love, when you have like an A+ arm, you can get away with that. And I think it's tougher for a guy like Sanders, who is an NFL caliber arm. It's just not, an A+ super upper tier Josh Allen arm thing. So if there's one thing that I would point to, it'd be that. Is it something that he can improve on with a better offensive line in front of him? Absolutely. And I think if he can get that straightened out, and even if he doesn't, he still has a chance to be a pretty darn good NFL quarterback.
In other words, throw the ball away sometimes.
The number of sacks.
Get to your third spot and get to your third or fifth step and get it out of there. Yeah. Right? Just don't hold it. Get the ball out a little bit quicker.
And you've questioned, and I think it was a great point, and you're the first one I saw make it, is where's the processing? If he's such a great processor, why is he struggling to get the ball out sometimes in a very simple offense?
Hey, look,
that was a really good point, I thought.
And I've said this a bunch, right? I don't think people like us, and frankly, anyone that's, again, I stress the importance of the one-on-one meetings, the 30 visit, the pro day. I talked to Kurt Warner last year. I've brought this up a million times. If you guys have heard this, I apologize. And I asked Kurt, how, when you look at a tape, can you figure out how a quarterback processes and what his decision-making is like? And he said to me straight up, John, I can't. Without talking to the coach, without knowing how it's being taught to him, without knowing how he's being taught to read out the play, there was no way for me, a former MVP, Hall of Famer, to figure out how well a college quarterback processes.
Right.
Well, if Kurt Warner can't figure that out, Lord knows I'm not going to claim that I can figure it out from watching tape. I think it's very important for all of us to be humble when we do this and to understand that we know a lot less than what these teams know in terms of evaluating these quarterbacks, and they have so much more access to these guys than we have in those forums that I already mentioned in my previous answer, that I've been very careful about saying, I think this guy's a really good processor. Notice I didn't mention processing with any of the other quarterbacks, right? Because I don't know. And unless you know how they're being coached to do something and what they're supposed to read out, there's no way for us to know that. So that's why I wanted to ask that question to guys that I think would know, that are former NFL coaches, NFL GMs, NFL quarterbacks, when they at least have a chance to figure that stuff out. When a guy like me, I'm not going to be so cocky and arrogant to say that I know whether or not this guy's a good processor. I've never played quarterback. I've never delved into a playbook. I know all these people that play Madden think they're like, NFL offensive coordinators. And that's the, you want to read that in cutoff based on what the safety does, the linebacker does on the shallow cross. And I'm like, you guys got to relax. Like, you played Madden, calm down. And I just think we have to be humble a little bit in some of the stuff we think we can know and figure out. simply based off of watching video.
Right. And I think a lot of people jump in on the buzzword over the last couple of years. Processing has been used a lot. We know that was directed to Daniel Jones a lot.
Well,
and then
it's because it's very important. Like,
sure,
it's a vital part of playing quarterback, which, by the way, is why evaluating quarterbacks is so hard.
Right.
Because that's such a hard thing to scout.
And it's also too, that's really where I wanted to go with that too, is the thing that why people point, well, you found a Brock Purdy, right? Or you found a Tom Brady. They are rare. You find more at the top that didn't work out. And the reason for a lot of that is you can't tell what's deep inside somebody. And as I've said multiple times, again, as a lay person on this, one of the big things though, a lot of it is luck on where you were drafted.
Yep.
Sometimes the system was so perfect, it allowed you to flourish, because guys who start out in a place that it's just not really ready for them, their development basically is stunted right from there. And they're behind the 8 ball to begin with.
Look, last year, Bo Nix is the perfect example.
Yeah.
He winds up with Sean Payton behind one of the best offensive lines in all of football with a good set of weapons at wide receiver. You throw him on the Panthers from 2 years ago that Bryce Young got thrown onto.
Right.
Do you think Bo Nix looks that way?
Yeah.
Of course not.
Right.
No way.
Yeah.
And, people talk about finding a Brock Purdy late. I don't like to just throw things at luck, but sometimes it is, right? You go back, I'll give a couple of examples. Do you know who the 49ers thought was a better prospect than Brock Purdy? Tariq Castro-Fields, the quarterback out of Penn State they picked in the 6th round. You know who else they thought was a better prospect than Brock Purdy? Kalia Davis, who they picked in the 6th round out of Central Florida. Oh, and by the way, Nick Zakej, an offensive lineman out of Fordham, they also selected in round 6.
Right.
So they love Brock Purdy so much, they selected those 3 players instead of him. The Cowboys tried to trade for Paxton Lynch. They tried to trade for They tried to draft Connor Cook. They missed on those guys. So they had to settle for Dak Prescott. Right?
Right.
Look, that's just the way it goes sometimes.
Yep.
Part of drafting is luck. And sometimes you have it, and sometimes you don't.
I totally agree. Yeah, and let's not forget, as I bring up multiple times, the Baltimore Ravens got Lamar Jackson after they took Hayden
Hurst. Yep, absolutely.
So there you go.
You got it.
So I've got 3 somewhat related questions on the defensive side of the ball now. So let's assume they get Abdul Carter, because right now, if you're reading the tea leaves, it looks like Hunter might be going number 2. So a lot of Giants fans would love to have Abdul Carter on the team. I'm one of them. However, I still struggle, like others do, about Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and the response is, well, you figure out and you make it work. Well, that explanation is a little too simplistic for me. Do you see him? I know you're not the coach, but I've been toying with how would they do this. He was an off-ball linebacker at Penn State for his first 2 years. So I almost envision him, if they're going to, because I can't imagine they're going to sit one of these guys on the bench.
Well, here's my question for you.
Yeah.
Let's start here.
Yeah.
What percentage of the plays would you like Brian Burns and let's assume Abdul Carter's on the team, right?
Yeah.
What percentage of the plays each game do you want Thibodeau and Burns playing? 70%? 75%?
Yeah.
Yeah, not much more than that. They're both
okay.
Yeah.
So let's say 70% of the snaps.
All right.
Well, there's 60% of the snaps for Abdul Carter.
Okay.
So he's automatically on the field for 60% of the snaps just by taking them off for 30%, which is what you want to play them at anyway.
Okay.
So
I see where you're going with that. Yeah.
Going from there, we hope they don't get hurt, but there's a pretty good chance both of those guys are not going to be healthy for 17 games. It's the NFL. Things happen.
Yep.
So you're going to get more snaps that way. So I think you're already making some pretty good progress there. And if you want Carter on the field more, and I think where you're going with this, Eric, is look, could you sneak him onto the field as a joker rusher?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you want to use him as an early down run stuffer. I'm not sure I'd go there.
Right.
But I think you can have all 3 guys on the field on passing downs.
Oh, sure.
I'm not sure if you're going to put Thibodeau or Burns inside as a defensive tackle or Carter. I'm not sure any of them are heavy enough for that.
All
but
right.
you could do 3 down linemen and then have Abdul Carter stand up as a joker rusher, right?
Oh, sure. And the Giants do this kind of amoeba thing anyways, too. Yeah.
So, and I think if you do that, let's say you have those guys on the field together for what, 10 to 12 plays a game, something
Right.
like that. Combine that with the other percentage of the snaps you're resting the other guys. I
Right.
think you're getting both guys close to 70 to 75%, all three guys close to 70 to 75% of the snaps every game. And that works for me. I'm
Right.
in.
Yeah.
And you do see Carter, a lot of his sacks coming from up the middle too.
Yep.
So you could do it like that. So related to that, one of the things that I've been arguing on the website is I think people have a vision of, well, let me take a step back first. So I had to sort of verify this by randomly going back and looking at Giants games last year to make sure that this is what I saw. You
Yeah.
still see Shane Bowen still employing 2 defensive linemen instead of 3 in a traditional 3-4 defense. But you do see them every now and then. They'll put a third defensive lineman with his hand in the dirt out there. So they'll flip back and forth. But there is a lot of 2 defensive linemen formations that he does run. I have been making the argument that if you're going to get another defensive tackle, I would get another run stuffing nose tackle type out there to get the beef. I call it the wall of meat, to get these 2 big guys up the middle. So because Brian Burns and Carter are a lot similar in this sense, they're not big edge setting linebackers against the run. If you're going to play the Philadelphia Eagles, you've got to be able to play the run. I almost want to get a Tyleek Williams or a Charles Grant if he did fall. I'm not Charles Grant. Michigan Grant, or again, Alfred Collins, somebody like that next to Dexter, because Dexter can rush the passer as it is. And some of these other names I'm mentioning, they're not strictly, I mean, they're mainly run players, but they can bull rush and they can get heat on the passer. It sounds like you mentioned Tyleek Williams earlier as somebody that you would be looking at 34. Again, I'm going in that direction. I'm not going for the typical 3 technique that you see as a penetrator. I want to get somebody that allows Carter, Thibodeau, and Burns to do damage and get them in a situation where you get them in 3rd and long, get them in 2nd and long. Because if the Eagles or the Commanders have us in 2nd and 4 the whole game, you don't get to have those guys rush the passer.
I agree. I went back and forth on this earlier in the offseason. And, I understood the need for a 3-tech to try to get interior pass rush. And I still think that's there. And by the way, if there's one position to double up on in this draft and you want to get a plugger and a 3-tech at defensive tackle, I'm good with that just because it's such a deep class. And I think that's just really good. But I'm with you. I do think Brian Dable is just tired of not stopping the run for one. I think he's just desperate to stop the run. I think he's just wants to really do that. And putting a big guy next to Dexter will help with that. Number 2, and by the way, you don't have to do that at 34. Like Jamar Caldwell will probably be there in round 3. You can go a little longer. Aeneas Peebles is another guy that can be a good run stuffer. Alfred Collins is another.
So Ty Robinson.
Ty Robinson.
Yes. Yep.
I'm not sure he's a 1 necessarily. I think he's more of a 3 or a tech or 5 tech, but I think he's good against the run. And I think one of the reasons they signed Chauncey Golston is that he is going to be the 3 technique pass rusher on passing downs.
Okay.
That's where he got a lot of his pressure as a Cowboy. And I think that's where you're going to see him a lot on passing downs, where maybe early on you'll see him on the edge, stopping the run a little bit. But I think where you're going to see him do his most damage and those passing downs, he's going to be the 3-tech next to Dexter. They can use him on loops. They use him on stunts. They'll let him use his quickness, use his length. He's got long arms, over 34 inches. And I think that's where he's going to get, I would say, more playing time as their pass rushing 3-tech than he will as an edge player. That is my kind of like preseason hot take, that's one of the reasons they really wanted to bring him in and why I think they will lean beef at defensive tackle in the draft, because they're going to use Golston as that pass rushing 3-tech.
Well, and I also think one of the reasons and this relates to I'm glad you brought Golston up because it relates to my final question on this part of it, is I think one of the reasons they brought in Golston too is when you interviewed him, again, one of the really good things that you do, and I recommend to everyone out there when you do this to watch these, is when the players, the free agents will have their media interaction with the press, but then you have your one-on-one sit downs with them, and your sit down with Golston, your first question you asked him is, what are you? And he said, four technique. Then he mentioned the 3 technique, also playing edge. I think one of the things I'm wondering about with Dable and Shane Bowen, are they going to run more 3-down linemen this year? Because Golston did play that role in Dallas, that he was the 4 technique, and then he shifted to 3 technique when they wanted the rush. And if you look at the clips of him, that's where he was doing a lot of his damage. Related to that, if that's true, I think that influences what the Giants also might do in this draft when you're talking about double dipping. If they are going to use more 4 and 5 technique defensive linemen, I could see them going after people like Birch and Savion Jones and people like that, more edge, traditional edge 3-4 defensive ends, but if you're going to do that, you got to use them. You're not going to draft those guys in, rounds 3, 4, and then have them sit on the bench. You're going to have to use them. So that's where one of the things I'm struggling is I wonder schematically, and I know you don't know this, but if the Giants are going to decide to get more beef up front and put another big body up front, and it's not just inside, but it's also at the 4 or 5 technique area as well.
I think they still believe the most important thing you do on defense is prevent big plays. And I think as long as teams are lining up 3 wide receivers against them, I think you're going to see nickel, which means you're going to be seeing the 2 defensive tackles and your 2 defensive ends. In a 4-man front will be the 2 outside linebackers. Now, if teams are rolling, 12 personnel out there or 21 personnel out there with 2 tight ends or a fullback and 1 tight end, I think then you'll see that more traditional 3-4 front, right?
Right.
But I don't see Golston a ton as a guy that is going to play that, old. Remember, Chris Canty used to play 5 technique for the Giants.
Yeah, sure.
He's 300 pounds.
Yes.
Like, he was a gigantic human being.
Right.
I could see one of the guys they brought in from Jacksonville, those veteran tackles, out there at the 5 technique a little bit. But I think it'll be very much team personnel opponent based than what they'll do. But look, I think they really like Drew Phillips. I think they want him on the field. I think they want Adebo and Banks on the field. They trust their safeties, both of them now. And I think they trust the Pinnock too, by the way, to come up and support against the run. So I still think primarily if teams are running out 3 wide receivers against them, you're going to see the Giants in nickel, which means the 2 big defensive tackles in the middle, and then Thibodeau and Burns or whoever else is out there as the 2 other guys in the front. That, again, I don't know anything, but that would be my guess.
If they're going to do that, though, against the Eagles, they better get that second big defensive tackle inside.
Correct. I agree.
They got to get that guy because.
So a lot of the premise that we've been doing right now is Carter's the one who falls to 3. What if Carter goes 2? The Giants choose Hunter.
Yeah.
Where are we going to see him? We heard Joe Shane's comments, and he kind of covered his bases in both directions. We could use him both ways, but then it was also on the player of how much he can really absorb the complexity of the offense and the complexity of defense, where it's different in college, where you're playing, you might be playing cover 2 5 weeks in a row. You might be playing something drastically different from one half to another to 1 week to another. Can they absorb all that information? So let's say the Giants get Hunter. Where do you think they predominantly will play him early? And they're not loaded, but we have a number of players on both positions that he can play. And then if we go that, how does that change what the Giants do then based on how things might fall in the second round, because you didn't get an edge, you didn't get the defensive lineman, you're almost now having to go that direction.
Yeah, I think you would have to go up front more on day 2 then, number 1. I think I agree with you on that 100%. How they would use Hunter, I think is interesting. Me personally, I see him as more of a corner than a wide receiver. And I talk to a lot of smart people that disagree with me, and I think they make a compelling argument for him to play wide receiver. So I could see a Bowen going both ways. I think he'd be good at both. And one of the advantages of drafting a guy like Hunter, and I don't think enough people bring this up, is that if he fails at one of those positions, you just put him at the other one, and you get 2 bites of the apple with one player. So it becomes a safer pick because you could try him at both positions. I think I was interested in how carefully Joe Shane phrased his answer to that question. Usually he's pretty prepared and he'll give pretty quick answers to all these questions. That when he looked up a little bit, he thought about it, because I do think that's something they've talked about. And I think he's largely going to leave it up to the coaches. And I think You don't want to box Brian Dable in terms of how he's going to use him and predetermine that stuff. To Joe Shane's point, you have to see how quickly he absorbs things, right? If he's struggling, let's say they put him at receiver first, because I think as a guy that can play inside or outside of wide receiver, it's easier to rotate receivers in and out on offense than it is to rotate defensive backs out on defense, right? I think defense, you want the same guys on the field to play together and have chemistry and not be taking guys in and out of there, especially in the back half. So let's say you start him on offense, and that's the first set of meetings he goes into. Brian Dable's offense is notoriously complicated, especially for wide receivers. There's a lot of reading the coverage. Oh, I do this if the coverage shows me this. I do that if the coverage shows me this. That sort of stuff. And there's a lot of one-word play calls where the receiver on one word needs to have it memorized exactly. All right, well, I got to do this. So I think you see how he absorbs all of that before you start throwing a whole nother set of positions on him, right? On defense.
Right.
So I think that's why Joe Shane was very careful answering that question, because I think a lot of it, one, will be up to the coaches. And B, I think the coaches are going to adjust their plan based on how he's absorbing what they're giving him wherever they start him off. I think the intention would be to use him on both sides, as Joe Shane said. In what way, how quickly, at what volume. I think what happens in the spring and in the summer will go a long way towards determining that.
Yeah, you mentioned Shane's reaction in the press conference. The one I thought was more interesting was at the owners' meeting was Dable, who likes answering questions like going to the dentist. When someone mentioned Hunter, he immediately perked up and his voice went up an octave.
It was the same thing when he was asked about Javon Holland, by the way. It was the same response.
Yeah. So I think again, reading the tea leaves, I think he likes him, but
that's a good question. I want to ask you, taking the Giants specifically out of the question itself is about teams in general, the scouts in general. So not specifically the Giants, not specifically the Browns. What is the consensus from the people that you've talked to when they're putting those two guys? Let's say Cam Ward's different because he's a quarterback, so we're going to ignore that for the second. So now you got Hunter Carter. How do they generally rank them? Is it pretty split? Some Hunters here, or is there a lot more? And does Carter's injury piece kind of play a role a little bit too? A little scare for some teams.
Yeah, I think everyone has to, go off the medicals. We don't know the medicals. I think people say, well, assuming the medicals are fine, then what do you do? And my thing for me, if you find out Carter's medicals could be a long-term issue, you take Hunter, right? If you have the choice between the two. But we don't know what the medicals are. Even if they tell you, all right, maybe you'll have to sit out, a couple weeks, who cares? For a long-time player, if there's no long-term risk, then you pick them and you don't care. I think for the most part, it's been split, to be honest with you. People make the argument for Carter, that for Hunter, that I hate this word because they used it, not me, that he's a generational talent. And because he can play both. And look, he is a pretty unique player. So I think if you're going to use that term, he's not a bad guy to use it on, right? But I think they think just his athleticism and his ball skills are rare to the point that he's worth the pick that high. I don't know how fast he is. He's never run. He's a little bit raw in certain things on both sides. I think because he plays both sides, he hasn't been able to lock in on focus on one. I think once he does, he's going to become really good at that really fast, because I think he's a really smart, dedicated kid that's right in the head. And I think he's going to get really good at whatever he does really quickly. He's only 180 pounds, right? So that's for the people that would go Carter. I think that's the argument on their side, where Carter is probably better at the one thing he's best at than the one thing Hunter is best at, right? Like if you ask Hunter, just be a corner or just be a wide receiver, versus Carter, just be a pass rusher. If you took those three individual players and how would you rank them? I think Carter's number one in that group. And I think a lot of people think Carter's number one in that group. But again, that's what makes Hunter so unique. He's not just one guy playing one position. So honestly, I think it's been split. I think it depends who you talk to. It depends on your team, what you're trying to fill, what you need. But I think both people see them as blue chip players, worthy as a top 3 or 5 pick in pretty much any draft, which is great. It's good to be picking third in this draft. It's not good to be picking 4th or 5th. I think then you're going to run into some, oh boy, who's the next guy up type of thing. So I think you feel really good about getting one of those two guys at 3rd overall.
I was going to ask you that. Who's your number 3 not taking out Cam Ward, who's 3 on your board?
It's probably Mason Graham.
Oh, really? I thought you
It
were
is
saying.
Mason Graham. It
Okay.
is. And again,
Would
you're
you-
picking a guy that, and this is my point. Mason Graham is a guy that's not huge, right? He weighed in under 300 pounds. He doesn't have long arms, and he never tested.
Right.
To have that guy be your number 3 player on the board, that tells you all you need to know about the number of blue chippers.
He might not even be the best
Right,
defensive tackle in this draft when it's all said and done. You know,
like if Derek Harmon ended up being
Derek
better than him, that would not surprise me.
right.
Walter
So-
Nolan has a chance to be better than him. That's possible too. So
So
yeah,
if
I'm with you. That's why when I say guys, like I said 10 to 30, hell, it could be 4 to 30, right?
Right.
Where
Right.
like you guys said Josh Simmons might go outside the
Right.
top 25, right? Would
Right.
anyone be shocked if Josh Simmons was the best left
No.
tackle in this draft and Will Campbell might get picked 4th?
No.
So
Right.
That's
that-
why I
that should
think
tell
there's
you
going to
all
be
you need to
somebody
know.
there at 34 that we're going to be like, he wasn't supposed to be there. I think that's going to happen. So
it could, and that's what always happens, right? That's what happened when the Giants drafted Xavier McKinney. For example, that year, I think we were all surprised. He dropped down to them. So it happens
Right.
all the time.
so if you're the general manager, you're not trading down out of 3. If you were the GM, it'd have to be a monster
it would
offer.
have to be a really nice offer.
Okay.
Any thoughts on? There's been some speculation that the Giants, depending on if Shador dropped a certain point, let's say we take Carter or Hunter, doesn't matter, that Shador drops into the middle portion of the first round, that the Giants might move back in. Do you see anywhere, and do you think, in your opinion, that they would be willing to give up the capital from a 26 draft that at least currently people are saying will be a much better quarterback draft? Would they give up that capital to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I throw that out. I mean, no one has any idea what the quarterback draft is
Exactly.
like. You know, at this time last year, Carson Beck and Quinn
Yeah.
Ewers were the top 2 quarterbacks in this draft class,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
And Carson Beck went back to school, and Quinn Ewers might not get drafted till the 3rd day, right? I think I would pick him in round 3, but he might not get drafted till the 3rd day. So I don't worry about next year with quarterbacks. You just never know, who the guys are going to be. There's no Drake May or, Williams this year where you knew a year ahead that they were going to be there and they were already really darn good. You don't have those guys. And I like Nussmeier as much as the next guy. I like Drew Aller as much as the next guy, but they're not at that level, right?
And
So
NIL is just, you never know who's going back now. So,
correct. And everyone, Arch Manning this, Arch Manning that.
I know.
No,
He's been in school for 4 years. To be honest,
Right.
I don't think he's going anywhere. So
but we don't want to keep you on too long, and we could spend hours talking about tight ends, running backs, all of these. I just do want to throw this out that you did mention in your interview on Scouts Honor something that you verified, something that I had thought was true, that Brian Dable tends to like receivers who can separate rather than the 50-50 jump ball guys. And the reason I want to bring that up real quick, and I was talking to John about this earlier, was there's a lot of different wide receivers in this draft. But some of them, I wonder if they're all going to be on the Giants board, but some of them I see being more Brian Dable type guys. I want to see if you believe that too. So I'm thinking people like Jalen Knoll, Jalen Royals, more than Besh and Harris are the types of guys that if you were guessing, the Giants are probably looking at if they were looking at wide receivers.
I think Besh actually separates pretty well at the top of the route. I think he gets in and out of his breaks pretty well. I was unimpressed with the separation at the Senior Bowl, and that's what I said in multiple interviews. That's probably where you got that from, Eric, when I left there, and I'm like, he just wasn't getting open. Then I went and watched the tape. Man, that dude gets in and out of his break at the top of routes really well. I think he's going to be a good player. I've turned around on him a little bit. I think you hit it with Jaylen Knoll. I think absolutely. Royals is another guy. Let me bring on my wide receiver list here real quick.
And people seem to be all over the place with Kyle Williams. I mean, they either love him or they're like farther down on him. But
like I mentioned, I did Chris Sims. He's coming on tomorrow. Chris Sims is number 2 receiver in this class.
See, that's what I mean. They love him or they've got him going in the 4th round. It's crazy on him.
Yeah, I think those guys are guys he would like. Isaiah Bond, now that you have all this stuff off the field with him that I don't know about. But I think he's kind of redundant with Slayton and Hyatt there, so I'm not sure that's where you go. Torrey Horton out of Colorado State is a bigger receiver, but I think he actually does separate pretty well. So that's somebody I would talk about and think about. Those are the guys that I think would kind of fall into that mix, which is good, right? Because this is a pretty diverse wide receiver crew.
Oh, it is.
good guys that are big, good guys that are smaller. And by the way, to your previous question, I never actually answered it. I went on my little tangent like a dope.
No,
Yes,
you're
I
good.
do think if they do really like one of these quarterbacks well enough, they would be willing to trade up to get that guy. I don't think they're trading next year's one, and I don't think you'd have to. But would they dip into next year's draft crop if they really decide after all these private workouts that this guy can be your future legitimate franchise quarterback and it cost you a day 2 pick next year to do it and a day 2 pick this year? I think they would be willing to do that if they believe in the player highly enough.
Sure.
Right.
Do you think, is it safe to say Giants organization, they haven't been overly, I won't say optimistic, but they're not really even overly stating the fact that Neal could be moving to guard. They throw it out there. Well, he could move to guard. He said he would be okay with moving to guard, but they're not saying they're definitely moving him to guard. And how much are they even counting on him? I think it's pretty clear by your opinion. They're probably not picking up the 5th-year option for Neal. Tibbs is still kind of unknown, but you expect that they would.
Yeah, look, we'll see about the 5th-year options. That would be my guess. I don't know anything. I think Evan wants to get on the field, right? He's a good kid. This is not going to be an Eric Flowers situation where he didn't want to leave tackle, and that's what that was at the end of the Eric Flowers tenure. That's not going to be Evan Neal. He cares. He's trying. He wants to play. So whether or not they move him, we'll see. I mean, the fact that they haven't shut that down tells me it's certainly an option when he gets back. And Joe Shane went out of his way at the owners' meeting to heap praise on Hudson, who they brought in to be the swing tackle. So I think they like him in that spot, which means I think even though you brought back Van Roten as an older veteran guard, I think Evan Neal at some point this offseason, as long as he stays healthy, will get that opportunity to do some work at guard a little bit, get some snaps, and frankly, see what he can do there to see if you can, still make him into a player that can start for you.
But the tragedy is if they knew if he could play guard, it changes the approach to this draft. But they just don't know.
And by the way, I think they might have even at some point tried him at guard last year, but he was out all offseason with the injury.
Hurt. Yeah.
They just never had the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, and I've mentioned that repeatedly on the podcast because people all the time say, why didn't they move him to guard? I said he was hurt. I said he couldn't, and he's been hurt. That's been part of his problem since he's been here.
He hasn't had a full offseason.
He hasn't, and this goes back to his rookie year. It just when he seems to be hitting a little bit of a stride, he keeps getting a lower body injury, and it sets him back. And I think that might be part of related to some of the balance and movement issues that we've seen with him. I think last year he had a hip, but he's had ankle issues. So I'm not ready to give up on him. It's just too bad that they don't know what they have in him at guard, because if they thought that he was a really good guard, that changes what the Giants do in this draft. So it's just an unfortunate situation.
Hey, injuries are a killer, man. You look back at that draft class, so many guys lost a lot of time due to injury in that initial draft class. That really, I think, set some of those guys back. McFadden, Flott, Neal.
They had like 4 ACLs, I think, that year.
Izudu, right? McKeithen, all those guys had season-ending injuries. It was really bizarre. And Wandale Robinson, right? It was really bizarre how many guys from that group got hurt with serious season-ending injuries.
Yeah.
Is real quick. So you've been on for a while, and you've had a long day, so I want to finish it up.
I appreciate that.
Any thoughts on Wandale Robinson's usage now with Russell Wilson's a little bit of a different quarterback than what we've had in the last number of years? His best trait in many ways is the deep ball, is to be able to move and throw deep. Wandale's more the intermediary guy. How do you see that meshing with Wandale and Russell, assuming Russell Wilson's the starter?
Good. Actually, I think that's a good question. I think you're right. I think Russell Wilson likes to throw that deep ball, and after the deep ball, I think you do get a lot of checkdowns to him. I think you could see a lot of those quick outs in the flat, right? Those kind of speed outs from the slot where he goes out there, catches those balls in the flat, tries to turn it upfield. You have like the slant flat concepts where you're trying to screen off the corner a little bit. So you can see him on those. I think when Wilson scrambles, Robinson does a real good job of making himself available and getting open off those scrambles for some short completions. So, yeah, I do wonder about the timing stuff over the middle because both players are not the biggest.
Right.
So, connecting over the offensive lineman with those guys at that size, I think that'll be interesting to watch. I had not gotten that question before, actually. I think that'll be something that'll be interesting to watch once we get to the spring practices and training camp to see how that develops.
And last question I have for you is, because I struggle with this, who's your favorite day 3 tight end in this draft.
Ooh, day 3 tight end.
And I know,
All right.
and I know some guys may go later and earlier and all that, but somebody who you think might be there in day 3 that you like, because I've heard you mention that you would like to get somebody with Theo Johnson, and a number of your podcasts, and I'm just
I wouldn't mind getting. I think Theo Johnson's a true wide tight end.
Right.
I think he's a blocker and a receiver. I would so maybe get like a twitchier guy that can kind of play that F role.
Right.
If Harold Fannin ever drops that far, I would be all over him. I think, despite that, a lot of people are like, he doesn't look that athletic. He didn't test that well. Just watch the tape.
Right.
Against Texas, Penn State, this guy makes plays, gets open, runs after the catch, runs good routes, is athletic, makes a miss, has burst. He's a really good player. I don't think he's getting the round 4. So more realistic, how about Oronde Gadsden Jr. out of Syracuse? That could be a round 4 or 5 guy that I think has some juice and can catch the football as a true F move tight end. He's almost like a big wide receiver. If Gunnar Helm gets to day 3 out of Texas, that's a guy that I think tested poorly because he hurt his ankle at the combine. I just think he's a real natural catcher. He's tall. He can get in and out of his breaks. And he can even block a little bit too if you need him to. So those would be 2 guys on day 3 that I would have some excitement about, being guys that can add a catching element alongside of Theo Johnson.
Okay.
Well, first off, thank you again for coming on, John. Let everybody
guys,
know.
hold on 1 second. You didn't ask me about running backs. I have to.
Oh, well, let's do it. All right.
I have to do running backs because I love the class so much.
Oh yeah. Well, I said we could spend another hour doing this.
Thank you.
I know what you're talking. Final answer: running backs. I have 13 guys with starter grades in this draft.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's a really good class. Round 2, again, I don't think the Giants do that, but Quinshon Judkins, good. Caleb Johnson, good. Cam Scatterbo, good. Travion Henderson, good. And top of the 3rd round, Dylan Sampson, all day. Damian Martinez, bigger guy, all day. You get to round 3, Bashal Tutin, RJ Harvey, bring it on. Brashard Smith, those are 3 of your explosive guys in the 3rd round that I really like. Jordan James and DJ Giddens can do a little bit of everything, but they're more between the tackles guy. And then like day 3, like Trevor Etienne might be there in round 4. He's a good player. Jaden Blue could be there in round 4. He's a good player. A lot of good players, guys.
What do you think of Raheem Sanders later in the draft? South Carolina.
He's a guy we watched a lot last year, and then he frankly had a terrible year. That was, I believe, Arkansas, right? And then he went to South Carolina. Big guy, has some breakaway speed. I think he got himself into the 220s. I think he was listed at 230. I think he rated at like 218 or 222 at the combine, if I remember right. Yeah, I think that's a guy in round 4 or 5 where if you want to wait that long, he's a guy that has some interesting characteristics that could complement Tracy. Now, I want to add an explosive guy to Tracy. Some people want to add a bruiser to him. I don't think you need to. I think Tracy can be a between the tackles guy. So I'm more interested in that kind of explosive guy to complement him. But if you want to put a banger next to him like Sanders, I wouldn't have a problem like that either.
Well, I thought that's where the Giants would go too, John, is again a more explosive guy given what we know about Brian Daboll. But all the 30 visits are these big physical guys, which again, I don't mind. But if they're going to, again, last year, I think Singletary had about 110 carries and Tracy had 200 and I want to say 220, somewhere around there. But if they're going to split the carries, some of these backs I wouldn't get because they're big physical. You feed them 25 times a game kind of backs, and I'm not sure they would do that. The one I'm really shocked at. I love him, but I'm shocked they had him in was Scatterbo. When they had him as a top 30 visit, I was like, because he looks like a throwback to me. To me, he's one of the more fascinating guys, but I would have not thought the Giants would be interested in him. But in a way, I'm kind of glad they are. But that guy's a throwback.
Yeah, look, I think there's a ton of running backs, and based on some of the reports, they had some of the smaller backs in too. So I think what's good is that they're open, and I think Tyron Tracy's versatility gives you the option, right? Where he could do either thing for you. So I think just pick the best back, and then you have Tracy put in the role you want to put him in, put the new guy in the role you want to put him in. And, maybe the new guy doesn't even do a ton his first year because you have Devin Singletary there. Who knows how that goes? But I think Tracy's versatility gives you optionality as to who that second running back is going to be.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, since we kept you for just a half second longer, I'm going to ask one other player real quick. Is this Jaylen Hyatt's last opportunity to kind of show something here with the Giants?
I don't know. I mean, he still has another year left on his rookie contract after this year. I think you'd like to see something a little bit more. He was unlucky last year for the first time in years. None of the Giants wide receivers really got hurt much until the end of the year.
Right.
So he just didn't have an opportunity to start because guys just stayed healthy. The chances that happening again, I think, are pretty small. So my guess is at some point this year, he'll have his shot, and we'll see if he can pull it off.
So he's got the right quarterbacks this
Yes,
time.
he does.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
That's true. So John, lay out where everybody can find you, and if you have specific things, you've already mentioned Chris Sims coming up, but a few other things, let people know what you got coming up.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff coming up. We have Big Blue Kickoff Live still every day, 12:30 to 1:30, Giants.com, the Giants app. Take calls from Giant fans, talk a lot of draft stuff. Tomorrow's show is actually recorded because the office is closed for Good Friday. So we have Kentley Platt, who does all the RAS scores, and then Matt Waldman, who
nice.
has a great scouting portfolio out every year. They'll be the combo show tomorrow for Big Blue Kickoff. Then we have one more draft season before the draft with Tony Pauline and I. That's next week. It'll be Tony's last mock draft. We'll kind of do it together. Then we have 3 more Giant Tunnel podcasts before the draft. Maybe a 4th bonus one with Phil Sims. We'll see if that happens or not. I'm working on it.
Cool.
But next week we're going to have we have Chris Sims coming tomorrow, Thomas Dimitroff on Monday. Next Wednesday will be Todd McShay. And then we hope to get Phil on too, and we'll squeeze him in somewhere in that mix. And of course, for fans that aren't familiar, giants.com/podcast, Giants app. Just click on podcast. It's all there. Or again, on your podcast platform, just search for whichever podcast you want, whether it's Big Blue Kickoff Live, Draft Season, or then all the other podcasts, including Draft Season 2, are on the Giants podcast network feed. So go check it out. I trying to be humbly say I think it's pretty good content. I think the folks will enjoy it. If you like the Giants and you like the draft, I think you'll have fun with it. I take as much pride in what we do around the draft as anything that we do. I think it's our best content. So I think fans will really enjoy it. And you guys can even go back, like in the last 3 weeks, if people have time, they're driving around, they have long drives for Easter. We've done Charles Davis. We've done Bruce Feldman. We've done Matt Miller. We did Dane Brugler. We did Nate Tice, a bunch of guys, Mike Renner, so many of these great draft experts that have come on to share their knowledge. It's been a lot of fun.
And every one of those shows that you just mentioned were outstanding. And I'm not just saying because you're here.
Yeah.
I said it to people. I said it on Scout's Honor today when I was on there. I said, you have outstanding guests. And if you wanted to know what's going on in the draft and you weren't a Giants fan, you should watch your stuff. So it's really top notch. And I also applaud the Giants for allowing you to do that, because you do put your opinion out there. And it would kind of look bad if they did something that you thought they shouldn't have done. And
hey, look, guys, like I said during the show, right? I try to be very humble with this stuff.
Yeah.
I understand that the Giants know so much more about these guys than I do. All I can do is watch video.
Maybe.
Right? These guys meet the guys. They work them out. They have all this information and background data.
Right.
Their scouting process is so complete. Brian Dable, Joe Shea, and their scouting staff know more about football than I do, and it's not close. Like they know more in 2 days than I know in my lifetime. So I'm doing the best I can to try to inform fans about what these players are, what they're like, and how they'll fit with the Giants. And I think all these players have a place in the league. If you get them in the right spot, you use them the right way, they all have a chance to succeed. And you have to trust the process, let it play out, and you see how it goes. I'm just trying to inform people about who the players are, where they go. And I say this on our shows. Look, the Giants do not tell me what to do or what to say in terms of programming. They give you more freedom to our broadcast side than most other teams do. And that's a credit to ownership. They understand that, New York, if we go out there and told the fans things that everyone knew wasn't true, you're insulting the intelligence of the fans. And we know Giant fans are all very smart. They're very intelligent. So we're going to tell it like it is. We're going to tell it straight. I'm certainly not going to tell these guys who to draft. They know a lot better than I do. Right. They don't ask my opinion. I don't give my opinion. They shouldn't ask my opinion. Hell, I should not give my opinion. This is their show. I'm just some idiot in my room trying to figure out football and learn as much about these guys as I can.
Okay, one quick related question to that, because I have wondered this. Have you ever over the years gotten any feedback from anyone upstairs that because of the quality of the guests that you get, that they do watch your show just to hear what your guests have to say. I would think that every now and then a general manager or someone in the personnel department might want to hear what someone you had on thinks about a certain player. But I don't know if they would ever give you that kind of feedback or not.
I think they try to insulate themselves from outside opinions, to be
Oh,
honest with
really?
you.
Okay.
I think I think they'll look at the consensus board and stuff like that. And frankly, as an evaluator, Eric, I've found that it's very hard to do, for one, because I'm in the media space. Unfortunately, I'm on Twitter, and you see this stuff come up. I'm a radio guy. I like to listen to podcasts. So I listen, I love Dane Brugler. I love the Athletic Football Show. I learn a lot from listening to the Athletic Football Show. Sam Monson and Steve Palazzolo, the stuff they do, they're very good. The Move the Sticks podcast, it's very good. But I find sometimes when I hear, and Connor Rogers and Trevor Sycamore with the stuff they do, Nate Tice on Football 301, these are all great shows. But I find sometimes when I hear things about players before I watch them, it clouds me when I finally get to watching them.
Sure.
And I have preformed opinions, even if it's subconscious. And I think it's really important to get an honest evaluation to avoid that stuff. So no one upstairs has ever told me that, this was really good. I heard that. This guy, I learned him from this. I think they use that data down the road to do their mock drafts and things like that. But I think guys that do this for a living, they trust their evaluation. They try to keep their mind clean about these players. And this is not the Giants. I think this is most places. You go in fresh, so you get a God's honest, your opinion evaluation of these guys. And that's how you put your board together without letting outside noise, opinions, and influences affect the way you think about these players.
Okay. I was always curious about that.
Well, I'll finish it up for you.
Now, I will say this. I maybe have had a scout say once, because they're on the road, they say they'll tune in to kind of figure out what the fan base is thinking. So I have gotten that before. I have gotten.
Okay.
So I will say, to finish this part up, I'm going to disagree with you slightly. You're not just a guy in your room.
Yes, I am.
You're one of those few, and I'm not kissing up to you. We've interviewed people. We years ago we interviewed Jerry Reese. The Giants brought him to us. We interviewed Jerry Reese. You're one of the few people, though. You work in the building. You are employed through them. Yet you speak to the fan with a knowledge, but with a fan's perspective as well. A lot of people speak and they're literally preaching to you. They're telling you what you should think. You don't do that. You're sharing what you've observed, what other people, and you give them a chance to speak. I've watched a lot of your interviews. You give them a chance. You really set them up. And that's the key when we're doing the hosting part, is just to tee up the other person. And you do a great job with that, but then you retell your pieces, I think, on a deeper level than some fans, and it reaches fans. So I think you do a really good job.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's funny. And then we got to roll.
You gotta
go. No, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, I think my wife wants to watch an episode of White Lotus upstairs, so I got to run in a second. But the way I try to approach this, to be totally honest with you, I know what it was like before I got in the building. Right, I grew up a huge sports fan in New York. I followed all the New York teams. Then I went to work at WFAN from 2000, and I interned in 2002, the fall, and then I worked there until 2007. So I worked there for 4 years after interning, right? And I thought I knew a lot. And I'm like, yeah, man, like I know sports. I've watched all this.
Right.
I really know this stuff. Then I went to work for a team, and I saw how things actually worked. I didn't know anything. It was really humbling to have to realize that, look, doesn't mean all your opinions are wrong, but to realize you really don't understand how these buildings work and how all these processes actually work. And you sit there and you're like, wow, I thought I knew everything. I really didn't know a whole lot. And so I think I understand where fans are coming from. They put a lot of their money into it. They put a lot of their time into it. They put a lot of their passion into it. And they deserve to have their opinions because of all that. So on Big Blue Kickoff, we want to give fans a chance to give their opinion. We don't screen callers out. If they have an opinion, we let them on the air, whether it's going to be a pro-organization opinion or an anti-organization opinion. They go on. We let them say their piece. And I think it's my job to tell fans that we understand and appreciate their passion. Now, if they come in and just give bad facts and make things up, I'm going to shut that down and I'm going to correct them. And sometimes you have to do that, right?
Yep.
I try to do it politely. As long as the people are polite to me, I will be polite back to them. But I think it's my job to try to explain how the stuff actually works, right? How the guys actually think about things, what the processes are actually like, to inform fans so they can be smarter about the game. Right. And I think that's my job. It's not for me to tell them their opinion's wrong. It's my opinion to say, look, well, you might think that. I get it. But, well, look at it from this direction. Maybe this is how the team's looking at it. Well, what do you think about that? And in terms of player evaluations, look, guys, everyone's right and everyone's wrong. There's no one that's perfect at this, right? And we're all going to be wrong about a lot of things. We might get lucky and be right about some things too. Fans can have their opinion about players. We give our opinion. We learn from each other. You come to a consensus. But I really think it's my job to understand where fans are coming from. As someone that's a huge Knicks fan, I'm going to be a lunatic on Saturday night when I go to the Garden to watch the Knicks play the Pistons. I'm going to be a madman, and that's fine. And I get that's how Giant fans are watching the games on Sundays, and I love it, and I appreciate that. But there's a way, I think, a smarter way to approach and think about the game, and I think that's what we try to do, is to have fans understand that other level of how the organization works, how the organization thinks, so they can maybe think about the game in a little bit of a different way than just as a fan that roots for the team on Sundays.
So it's a more polite way of channeling Jim Mora, going, you think you know, but you really don't know.
Yeah, and look, I think it is important for fans, and me too, by the way, everybody, it's important to know what you know. It's more important to know what you don't know.
Right.
And I think too many people in all walks of life and all things of all natures today. I mean, you go on Twitter and you will find experts on microbiology that have never gone to a college class, and they're like trying to tell you about stuff, right? And people think they're experts on everything. Nobody knows what they don't know. Right. Everyone is like, oh, this must be an original idea. No, odds are somebody thought of this many times before you did. And I think it's important that people know what they know what they don't know. And for people that are really experts in things, and I'm not saying I am, trust me, that just try to spread the knowledge and make sure everyone has different points of view. They have different knowledge, and you try to inform people about how in an NFL building, in an NFL franchise, things really do actually work.
Exactly.
Great.
Well, with that said, we've had you for long enough. You do have, by the way, you were way behind, and White Lotus season already ended, so you guys are playing catch up.
We are, and I think we're hitting episode 4 tonight, which I'm told is supposed to be probably one of the better ones. So I'm kind of excited to see it.
Things start to change, yes. So you'll enjoy. I've seen the whole thing. My wife and I watch this, yes. But again, John Schmeelk, thank you so much for being on. Yeah. We appreciate it. Love the depth. We're going to follow all your stuff, and we'll be paying attention. And hopefully, we can catch up again down the road. And
sounds good, fellas. Always fun, man. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, man. Have a great night, and we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, so that was John Schmeelk of Giants.com podcast of the Big Blue. Is it Big Blue? It's not banter. It's a big. I'm trying to remember what he called it. It's with Paul Dottino. They do the weekday ones.
It's the I can't think of the name.
We just said it literally. I'm sorry. It's late at night.
I always just put on the channel and I just watch the channel.
I started
Big Blue Kickoff Live.
There we go. Thank you.
But I'm thinking about his regular draft content, which I think is under another umbrella. So
you can find if you go to him on X, you'll find all of his stuff. It's listed there, and I think you can look him up, as he said, on YouTube. I just go to the YouTube channel and I look at latest videos, and it's every single day. It seems like they've got he's got a superb interview on with somebody that I'm always learning something about. It's just fantastic content. So I've learned so much just watching their channel in the last few years on the draft. So it's like I said, like I told him, if you weren't a Giants fan, you should watch it just to learn about these guys. I mean, it's amazing. It's interesting to hear too, just the different, even his perspective on some of the players, and you could see he's really into it. We were like, hey, we've kept them on for a while, and it's like he's like, hey, we got to talk running backs still. We still got to talk running backs. I'm like, I had so many questions, but we were an hour in. But I wanted to go on. I want to talk about defensive backs. I want to talk about linebackers. I mean, we didn't even get the, and we didn't really get into the defensive line prospects, but we only had so much time. We don't have anything else planned for this weekend. We are very busy next week. And I, Eric and I still have to kind of work out, but I think we're probably going to be on quite a bit throughout the week. We are live during the draft. We do have the day before the draft. We will have Cy on. He'll be back on with us, so we'll be talking to Cy. And we are trying to nail down the day for Jordan Renan, who's agreed to come on. So we'll nail a day down to get him. A lot of stuff, but I think you and I still need to go through. I know you love doing the simulators. I like doing the mock drafts. It's kind of the same thing.
Right.
I think we need to kind of go through and just play some scenarios out
Yes,
of like, okay.
I would like to do that. And I'd like to get feedback in the comments section from people for our live draft coverage. This question came up today because the picks often get announced on X before they get announced on television. And some people don't want us to do that. So I'd like to know from the viewers, do you guys want us to react to the TV feed, or do you want us to react to maybe knowing the pick 30 seconds earlier or a minute earlier?
Which also includes, because we're live, the chat box is open. So if people are throwing it in the chat,
that's a good point.
You're going to see
really
it. So you're going to see it in the chat too.
So we don't have control over that. We don't.
I could really. There's ways you could limit, but then it's limiting pretty much everything.
Yeah, I don't think we should.
And I don't want to do that.
And we don't know there's a trade.
Right, there's that. So
I
think for you and I
just have to wait.
I think we wait till the announcement. We don't. People will see it in the chat, but we'll wait for the announcement to then say what we're going to say. Now, if a trade's coming up, because we don't think we need to wait. If we hear that the Giants are trading down, we might want to start talking about that. Hey, they're about to say that we're trading down. Let's start talking about what's going to happen here. But the pick itself, I kind of like to hear. I like to hear it.
I like to hear it too. But the problem is, John, is if we have chat open and somebody says they just drafted Shedeur at 3, you and I are not going to ignore that. We're not going to ignore
That's also true too. I can't commit to that. Or we'll have to play it by ear.
Your baby, if they take Jaylen Milroe, you're not going to be.
If they take him at 3, I'm going to die.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know what I mean. So,
no, I know what you mean.
All right, so we shouldn't keep that. We've already gone.
No, we see. Yeah. So we'll do that. You and I will talk, but I think we'll try to do as much as we can next week, because it's getting to be go time. It's fun time. We're going to be live on the first night. We are not going to be live on Friday. We could. I have plans. I can't do it then. I know.
Be great.
I agreed. It's my wife's birthday weekend, so
Friday's going to be to me. I think Friday's going to be the best day. I think Friday's going to be. I'm not trying to get you out of it, but I think Friday's going to be the best day. I mean, we got 3 picks.
But I think I'm going to take Friday off, so we will recap the day before and then lay out what could be coming for that night. If that's okay with you, I'll work that out.
That's fine.
I'll work it out with you after the fact.
I thought we were going to be live on Friday. That's
darn it. Now I got to go talk to my wife about that.
I think
So
if we
don't
trade, we're going to trade down from 34. If we do have a trade, I think.
All right.
Not way down, but I think they could trade down.
So hold that thought. I may be broadcasting live Friday night. I did look into some of the issues with the streaming pieces. I have a couple of ideas on what I think. Streamlabs was very responsive to a couple of things. So I'm going to work on some stuff. Eric and I will talk about it later on, but I think hopefully that won't be an issue. In worst case scenario, I will switch entire CPUs and go with a different one that will only stream on. So but I think I know what the issue is. So we'll try to work with that.
Okay.
This worked out great. This looks perfect.
Yeah. We don't have problems with Zoom. So great, cool. Okay.
So that being said, we're this please like, subscribe. We're getting there. We've got a lot. We're closing in on 100,000 total views, by the way. We're over 93,000 at this point. So keep it going, and we're gonna keep trying to make it better and better. And with that, unless you got anything else, Eric, we're gonna call it a night.
Nope. I'll just let people know that this interview is going to drop on Friday morning. So
you'll know that if you've already watched the whole thing.
Yes.
So we will catch you again very soon. Thanks for watching.